for that warm introduction. Good morning to everyone. I'd like to say it's a real pleasure to be here in Mumbai at ReTechCon this morning. And it's a real honor and a privilege to be talking to all of you. I'm based out of Bangalore. And as I made my way from Bangalore yesterday night, I was thinking about sort of the transformation, one has, in terms of mindset coming to Mumbai. Obviously, Bombay is, the hub for, business, if you will, and Bangalore being the technology hub, right? But another sort of dimension to that, I think fundamentally is, what Kumar also talked about, the production and the consumption. I think we've always focused, particularly as a technologist, on sort of the production of, technologies, products, services, right? I think right now we are in the midst of a massive digital revolution, as we're well aware. And I think that consumption is being driven by, a lot of it by business, by the retail segment. So all of you, that are retailers here, from business and technology, you're basically driving that. So, we should recognize that. So anyway, as I was thinking about what to focus this morning, I thought I'll take the topic of artificial intelligence. It's the big elephant in the room. And I thought I would borrow a card, if you will, from the game poker, right? All in with AI, to really talk about, what we are talking about now is a bet we need to make, a bet that we may not have a choice on, when we talk about automation, AI, and some of the greatest technologies, right? And how they're impacting our lives. And so we'll spend a couple of minutes talking about that. But before that, I think it's very important to recognize that today, indeed, we're living in the future, right? If you think about, your early childhood days, reading science fiction, seeing science fiction movies, serials, remember Star Trek, right? Who could have imagined that fast forward today, at the flick of a button, you could see and talk to anyone, anywhere across the world, right? Who would have imagined that, your daily commute to work and back in the evening, the navigation would be driven through a machine? Who would have imagined that your preferences for, for what you eat, what you shop for, what you buy eventually would be curated by machines, right? So we are all indeed living in the future. We may not realize it, depending on, how close we are to technology or how much we leverage technology. But I think fundamentally, the future is here today. And when we talk about the business side, right, I think we talked about the digital transformation that's happening globally. I think one of the biggest revolutions, and it's a revolution, not an evolution, is happening in India in terms of back to, what Kumar talked about, consumption of technology, right? And I think it's very important to recognize that, plant a flag today, because in years to come, we'll talk about, that, there was a big, revolution that happened in India in terms of digital build-out and how businesses consume technology, entirely new way, and how that impacted, consumers and businesses alike, and, made life very, very different. So just to, I want to just recap how we have got here, right? As sort of being an engineer, I think it's fair to say, I think everything, that's exists today is a logical culmination of the evolution of computing and technology in the last 50, 60 years. If you look back at, the 50s, 60s, the advent of the mainframes, and after that, personal computing happened in the 70s, 80s, and then we had, the whole internet come along, right? So client-server architectures. Remember back then? Then we had mobile devices. Today we have ubiquitous, connectivity, right? Near ubiquitous connectivity, unlimited bandwidth. India has some of the, cheapest data plans, right? And fast forward, cloud coming to the foray, SaaS, different business models, right? And now data, big data and analytics, right? So everything, we've achieved basically a very big, sort of data foundation today, and that's a logical culmination of everything that's happened in the last 50, 60 years. And where that's going next is, this thing called artificial intelligence. So if you look at the whole data foundation, right? I mean, if you look at the most valuable companies in the world today, the Facebooks, Googles, right? They have the most expansive and richest sets of data, right? And that's really the new currency, the new oil of this world, right? So on the back of that data foundation, now we have unlimited compute, storage, processing, real time available on the cloud and such, right? So you have the advent of AI. So today, I think it's fair to say we live in an era of AI. And let's all recognize that. We may not be aware that it's impacting us, but it's coming very, very fast, right? And when we even talk about business, I think AI is going to disrupt, and it's starting to already disrupt. And as a vendor, right, my sort of day job, I'm looking at completely new systems that are coming, through startups, and my role at NASSCOM, right, where people are applying completely new techniques in terms of how business is done, down to every business process, every role, every individual, every activity, every task. And it's happening at a very, very fast click. So what does that mean in retail? That's the big question, right? So if you look at retail, you look at, whether it's merchandising, store operations, your supply chain efficiencies, e-commerce, omni-channel, customer marketing, and everything else in between, right? Everything is right now being massively disrupted through AI, right? Whether it's, everything around sales, inventory, pricing, allocation, assortment, obviously the product, right? Promotions, processes, people, each and every aspect of every retail role and business process is going to turn on its head over the next couple of years. And that's already starting to happen. And I'll give you a very simple example. If you look at customer marketing, right? Typically a marketer, will try and understand all his customer journeys, right? And then plan a campaign, right? To do that, the marketer has to understand today billions of data points. Not only the data that exists in the enterprise, you have to understand what's happening on social. You may have some IoT going on in your store, right? You need to look at competition, weather, socioeconomic, demonetization, GST. All of that impacts, how people shop with us as retailers, right? So typically to do that, someone has to manually understand that analysis, using technology and systems, and then come up with a campaign, right? And for that campaign, they basically come up with a segment or a micro segment, right? And then they select some offers from an offer bank or some marketing messages, and then you decide what channels you need to send it on. Then you need to figure out, is it a one-time campaign? Is it a recurring campaign? Then you need to understand the universe of your campaign calendar. What is the impact, in terms of lifts and so on, right? Now imagine trying to do that manually. How AI is turning that on the head is the new class of systems coming up. So let's say you're a marketer. Your objective is for the last 1 month, you want to lift the repeat visits, let's say by 2.5%. So that's your objective. You give that to AI. You'll give a budget to that, and that's it. AI is going to go, work on your data, and it's going to come up with a recommendation, looking at the universe in terms of what kind of campaign you need to execute, right? So that's the kind of automation we are talking about through AI. Another example, in terms of e-commerce today, a lot of us retailers, in the e-commerce space, we have a cold start problem. Let's say if you have a first-time visitor on your website, you have no history on that visitor. You don't know their identity, right? So you may get a very, sort of a narrow window to try and convert them, right? Maybe have them sign or do a transaction, right? AI is helping in such areas where just on a couple of clicks, real-time AI engine can try and maximize the probability that they may actually do a transaction or may actually register with your, some end goal in mind, right? So those are kind of use cases that AI is solving today, and that, these use cases are real. And overall, when you look at data and analytics, AI is being applied in a very, very interesting manner. If you look at the whole analytics world, right, I think it's very important to have a foundation, a data foundation in terms of your enterprise data, customer data, any type of external data that enriches you. But, so you need to have that single view of data, single view of customers, single view of inventory, everything real time. That's where the world is going, particularly if you're omni-channel. But really, the game is gone in terms of advanced analytics, obviously, right? Prediction, forecasting, recommendations. But there's a new class of analytics that's coming up, which is around, you may have heard of the word causality. As a retailer, wouldn't you love to know why sales was down last week in my store in Koramangala? Down to a category, down to a SKU, right? Those are very interesting questions AI can answer for you. If you build the right use cases on, using the right AI techniques, whether it's machine learning, deep learning, neural nets, right? So that's a very interesting area. The other is around anomaly detection, automated anomaly detection. So if you're a retailer, wouldn't you love to come in the morning, depending on whatever role you have, to know, which are your high-value SKUs that may go out of stock, to actually detect that anomaly before it happens and get a prescription on how to prevent it, looking at your entire universe of your business, right? So that's where AI is going, where in the future business systems will be prescriptive. You come to your office, the system will tell you what 5 things you should do, what 2 things you should not do. It's going to run the rest for you, right? That's where the machine is going to get very, very intelligent. And it's going a step further now. I think over the next 18 to 24 months, you'll hear a lot more about NLP, basically natural language processing. So the way you interact with your business systems, as a retailer is going to transform tremendously. You'll be talking to it in plain English or, your favorite language, right? It'll be through voice or, think of your favorite search experience, maybe a Google box. So you'll say, hey, tell me why sales was down in my store in Koramangala yesterday, and that's it. You will not log into a system, go through dashboards, KPIs, and controls and levers, right? So it's going to completely, the way you interact with the machine is going to completely transform itself. So, I just want to call this out. I think the AI is like a tsunami. Having spent a lot of time and, worked with a lot of global companies and seeing, what businesses are adopting, right? It is a tsunami. Right now, the waves are smaller. Sort of you can navigate over them, surf over them. They're going to get bigger and bigger. So the big question is, what do you do? If you're not paying attention and sort of adopting those kind of use cases, those kind of systems, right? Building them whether in-house or, commercially, I think, there's a risk. There's a risk. And that's the whole talk about automation. I think automation can be a very positive thing. It can free us all up to do much more interesting things and more creative things as opposed to, sort of the use cases that we need to manually spend a lot of time and intervention on, right? And, in terms of where we go from here, I think it's definitely a revolution, not an evolution. When you look at the India context, from the NASSCOM perspective as well, right? I think there's a huge opportunity for us in India to build out one of the greatest digital revolutions the world has ever seen. I think it's happened in the United States about 20, 30 years back on the back of defense spending, on the back of